Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This time, we're going back to cover what is, frankly, one of the worst shows I've ever seen. It's WCW Great American Bash 91. It's the We Want Flair show.
After so long covering just WWE, and I mean, it's been like, what, 6 months now of just WWE?
Yeah, it's been quite a while.
It's so refreshing to get out and watch some WCW that sucks way worse than any of the WWE we watch.
I I think WCW was unfairly maligned, but this show was a lot of the worst of WCW.
This show, segment for segment, it may be the worst show of all time. Like, there's not one redeeming segment to any single part of this show. The best match on this show lasts 2 minutes and 8 seconds.
Yeah. And when we say worst show ever, it's not fair to compare this to
No.
Heroes of Wrestling or CZW indie stuff. This is a national promotion with millions of dollars behind it, owned by a major television station. This is real professional wrestling, and it's absolute garbage.
Yeah, you can only compare it to WWE shows or large scale NWA shows and shows on that scale, shows that all this money and effort and time was sunk into. People busted their asses to put on this show. Dusty Rhodes stretched the limits of his creative imagination to create the gimmicks and storylines for this show, and they all failed as badly as people can fail.
It's incredible. A bunch of serious, respected minds in professional wrestling, a bunch of great talent in front of the camera, behind the camera, millions of dollars, major television production, all combined to put this on.
And literally, it's not so much that it's bad, so much that it just feels wrong. Everybody's doing something wrong. Every match just feels off. Everything about it just feels like you wish you could pull someone aside and be like, "Hey guys, y'all are fucking this up."
Yeah, it does feel like almost everyone on the roster is in the wrong role in some way.
Absolutely.
Oh, so this show is most famous for being the end of Ric Flair's initial run in WCW and also as a result for being a complete disaster. So this show is Ric Flair's departure from WCW. He's been the top star in WCW, NWA, Jim Crockett, Mid-Atlantic, whatever, for at least a decade at this point. I mean, he's pretty much synonymous with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, won the title for the first time in 81 or 82, and has been the champ on and off for 10 years now.
Yeah.
He headlines Starrcade basically every year. He is unquestionably their franchise player.
And there's a feeling amongst fans, especially fans who weren't watching at the time, of which I'm one, that Ric Flair was kind of untouchable at this point, that there was no reason not to give him the keys to the kingdom and whatever he wanted because he's fucking Ric Flair. But we're getting into the 90s now, and that shtick is running a little thin. It's probably he could have kept it going for another 5 years or so, but diminishing returns were already in evidence.
No, I mean, very strangely, in retrospect, getting fired from WCW was the best thing that ever happened to him because it absolutely reinvigorated his career.
He got to go away. The fans got to realize how much they missed him. The fucking WCW realized, oh shit, we got to give him anything to bring him back. You can book. That's fine. You can wrestle whoever you want. Here's the title.
Yeah, he got to go to the WWF, win the world title, really vindicate himself, as ridiculous as it sounds like to think that Ric Flair needed to be vindicated. But by this point in his career, he kind of did. I mean, he was on a decline. He was not really drawing a ton at this point. He had a really good and hot run in 89, but by 91, things have cooled off. The last Clash of the Champions before this pay-per-view was main evented by him against Bobby Eaton, and I think it was the lowest rated Clash of the Champions of all time.
I mean, you can't blame that all on Flair, unfortunately.
Yeah, Bobby Eaton, great worker, great tag team wrestler, not really a main event star. I don't think anybody bought that he was going to beat Flair and win the title.
And that's another part of the problem. And that's what becomes very clear when Flair leaves, as we're about to cover in detail, is that when Flair leaves, it's like, we got nothing except Sting and Luger. Everybody else is miles away from ready.
Yeah, they're either past it or they're not there yet.
Yeah.
You've got a great next generation of talent here with Steve Austin and Dustin Rhodes and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, but none of those guys are ready to be the world champ.
No, and everybody they have to work with is like 45 years old and on their way out.
So, I mean, really, I feel like to tell this story, you got to go all the way back to like 1988 when Jim Crockett is going bankrupt. They've signed all these wrestlers to big money, guaranteed contracts with the idea that their pay-per-views are going to do big business and they're going to be able to make so much money they'll be able to afford to pay everybody this guaranteed money. Unfortunately, their pay-per-views all fail because they're sabotaged by the WWF and they completely suck.
Yes.
So they have no money. They're coming to the end of the year and they owe millions of dollars in balloon payments and they don't have the cash. So they're about to go bankrupt when Ted Turner comes in as their saving angel and buys out the company, which can't really be in a better position than being owned by the television company, can you?
No, not at all. I mean, like they're not the only company ever to pull that off. And I mean, it's a cushy gig. It's pretty much job security for life.
Turner buys Crockett, saves it from bankruptcy. Unfortunately, the guy he chooses to put in charge of it is Jim Herd, who is the pizza man, former vice president at Pizza Hut, now an executive at Turner, and had been the station manager in St. Louis for the channel that aired Wrestling at the Chase in the 1970s, which in theory, this seems like somebody who would be a good fit to run the wrestling company, like got experience in business, experience at the network, knows TV, knows wrestling. The problem is wrestling was so insular back then, it's not clear whether he as like a director and station manager was actually like smartened up at all to how the business worked.
Oh, I'm sure that he wasn't. I mean, Sam Munchnick wasn't telling him shit.
Yeah. Like I don't think Jim Herd like thought wrestling was a shoot or anything, but Munchnick was not like bringing him into the office and be like, okay, this is why we're doing this, and this is why this guy's going to beat this guy, and like this is the psychology. Nobody you were not getting those secrets unless you were a member of the family at that point.
I think like a president of wrestling operations, kind of. With like somebody at the wheel telling him what he needs and him being the go-between between the network. That was the role he needed to have.
Yeah.
He actually in charge of the product was a total mistake.
Instead, he's essentially in the Vince McMahon role. Like he's got final say over everything that's going on TV, and he was not at all suited for that. We've all heard kind of the stories about Jim Herd. Like, I don't know that we don't need to go into all his crazy, terrible ideas. He's just one of those guys. There's a few people in wrestling who like no one has anything good to say about, and like Herd is one of them.
Yeah, and it's not like hate. Like people hate Bill Watts, but they also love him. Like he engenders a lot of emotion.
Respect him.
Yeah. Nobody respects Jim Herd.
No.
He was a man who should not have had this job, who did a shitty job with it. Yeah. And then got fired.
Alienated, just an incredible. You look at the list of people he ran out of the company, and you can build an amazing roster out of like, Ric Flair, the Road Warriors, Jim Cornette, the Freebirds, the Midnight Express. Like,
if you told me that he was an agent that Vince McMahon sent into Turner to sabotage it, I would believe you, because Vince got a lot of talent in those years.
So 1989 is creatively a strong year for the most part. We did that Great American Bash 1989 show, which was really one of the best pay-per-views I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Certainly one of the best WCW pay-per-views ever. Had like great Flair Funk match. 89, you get the Flair Steamboat matches. A lot of great stuff that year. Their business didn't really click for most of it because George Scott was booking. He didn't really have his fastball anymore. He didn't understand that they had to book for TV now instead of for live events. When you're owned by a TV company, you got to keep the TV company happy. George Scott had a very 1960s and 70s mindset that this was all really about the house shows and we couldn't put anything on TV or we'd hurt the house shows.
I'm actually very sympathetic to Ted Turner and the whole Turner organization during this time, because they're looking around for someone who knows how to run a wrestling company in the 90s, a television wrestling company. And the only problem is that person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, no one has ever done it before. Even Vince has never done that. He's still running the live event business.
Yeah, they're not doing a TV business. They've got the Saturday night's main events at this point, but that's 5 a year. It's not. They're not doing big TV every week. Their TV's all syndicated. It's all squash matches.
So they're bringing in a lot of old wrestling guys who know wrestling. But what you need is somebody who knows what wrestling's going to be, and nobody does.
No, they just stumble ass backwards into it with Eric Bischoff.
Right. Who does a great job of basically laying out what wrestling is going to be up until the current day. But then he flames the fuck out because he's not Vince McMahon and nobody can be.
Yeah. But yeah, Bischoff was the first guy, I feel like, to really understand television. Like, even if he didn't get wrestling all the way, he got television, and that was more important.
I would honestly go so far as to say that Vince McMahon never really got television either. Even to this day, I still don't think that he does. Because he's still following the template that Bischoff set out.
Yeah.
Like, to the letter. Like, nothing has changed. So it might be said that, like, Eric Bischoff is the only person who has ever successfully, like, transformed a wrestling company into a television wrestling company.
He reinvented wrestling. We're still waiting for the next person to reinvent it.
Anytime now. Come on, Cody in the Bucks.
Yeah, things haven't changed much since Nitro.
That's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, we're 25 years on now and pretty much still watching the same wrestling TV every week.
Yep.
So after 89, George Scott gets fired after they don't promote the Clash of the Champions with Flair and Steamboat. They ran the Louisiana Superdome and drew 5,000 people in that massive football stadium. Like, had to basically do the match in the dark to hide the fact that nobody was there.
So sad.
So that got George Scott fired, and he's replaced as head booker by Ric Flair. Flair takes over the booking committee in August 89. His run as booker, successful in some ways, but most people you hear talk about it say, like, booking was not for him. Like, he's just not detail-oriented, didn't have the kind of willingness to put the time in to make it work. But got the TV ratings back up, mostly because he just booked himself. Like, just booked himself on TV in great matches every week, and that drew.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that was the wrong thing to do, but I mean, honestly, he was the only real draw on the show at that point.
Yeah. I guess we skipped over something important back at the end of 88, beginning of 89, which is Dusty Rhodes getting fired.
Having a spike in his own eye.
Yeah, so the first thing that really got him in hot water was he tried to book Flair to lose the world title to Rick Steiner in like a 2-minute squash match at Starrcade, which ruffled some feathers. And then after the company told him, like, you got to clean this up, no blood, no gore, nothing like that, had the Road Warriors jam a spike in his eye on live TV.
God love you, Dusty.
Yeah. So yeah, that got him fired, and he went to the WWF, and to be continued on that one.
Yes.
So Flair books from like mid 89 to the end of 90. Jim Herd just drove him crazy. Like, even though the ratings he turns the TV ratings around, he gets their house show business up. Like, Herd just won't stop giving him shit, and like Flair just gets sick of it and quits.
Yes. And like, to hear Flair tell stories of it and just be like, this man would come into my office and be like, hey, you got to put the ding dongs on the show. And also, well, you're not so fucking tough. It's like, oh, yeah, it sounds so damn horrible working for Herd.
He's saying Flair should become Spartacus and like get a diamond stud earring because he's got to change with the time. Like, what are we doing here?
I know.
That feels like deliberately antagonizing him.
Oh, I'm sure that it was. I mean, I'm sure that that's exactly how it was meant.
And like, I'm sure Ric Flair disrespected Jim Herd. Lots of people did.
Yes. And like, it's not a one-way street. We're just never going to hear from Jim Herd because Jim Herd's never going to like conduct an interview with Conrad Thompson.
No, Jim Herd's dead. To start with, he's dead. But also, like, I didn't listen to the whole thing. I did find a clip of him talking on like it was Meltzer's radio show from the early 2000s, and I didn't get through the whole thing, but it was interesting to hear from him because really, you just never hear from the guy.
Yeah,
seems like he kind of disappeared after this.
You just never hear from like the corporate people in WCW.
No.
Like they're not talking to us.
Yeah. Yeah, they made their money and retired. They don't have to do podcasts.
Exactly.
So, I mean, the rest of 89, Sting and Flair become friends in 89, and then Flair turns on him after Starrcade when Sting beat Flair in the finals of a tournament. They're building towards Sting winning the title that spring, but then Sting blows out his knee climbing a cage at the Clash of the Champions, and they have to put that on hold. So instead, they sub Lex Luger into Sting's place. Flair retains against Luger at Wrestle War in February on a count-out, and then he retains on a DQ in a cage match at Capital Combat.
As you do.
In May. Yeah, a disqualification in a cage match. Why not?
I mean, RoboCop did show up.
Yeah, good thing RoboCop was there to save the day. There's a really interesting incident in here. It's May 23rd at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago. Flair is booked against Lex Luger. He comes to the building. He shows up, and he sees there's all these like photographers and TV equipment there, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And Herd is like, oh, you're losing the belt to Luger tonight.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, look, you might pull this today and nobody would care, but like this is a different era where like being the world champion means something, and like you don't just have your guy show up to the show and tell him you're dropping the belt tonight.
Well, let's talk about this because this is a complicating factor that's going to get all involved in this whole situation.
The deposit?
Right? Yeah. See, Flair feels like he owns the belt.
He does.
Because he bought it.
He's got damn near 40 grand on deposit at this point.
And that's the thing, like you had to pay money to take the belt. If you couldn't afford it, you couldn't be the champion. Like that was just simple as. You couldn't.
Yeah, you put down $25,000 as collateral so that you couldn't leave the promotion with the belt.
Yeah.
Like, so this is a real thing. You really do legally own the belt.
Yes. So that's when Flair leaves and takes the belt with him, he argues, it's mine. And like the courts are like, yeah, basically.
He owns the physical belt. He doesn't own the intellectual property. So they couldn't use it on TV, but he just kept the belt. He never gave it back.
And that's the thing. So he also feels like he functionally should have some say in who takes it from him.
Yes.
Because it's his.
Yeah, he does not want to lose this belt to Luger. He's agreed to drop it to Sting. Sting is the guy he should lose it to. Shit, he probably should have lost it to Sting at like the end of 88. I don't know what took so long here.
They just kept building Sting, but like they weren't. He was just continuing sideways for like 5 years.
Yeah, so him and Herd get into it. He's like, fuck no, I'm not dropping the belt tonight. I'm not dropping the belt to Luger. I'm dropping the belt to Sting. And finally, he's like, I'll lose the belt to Luger tonight, but you're going to give me my release so I can get the fuck out of here and go to the WWF because I'm done with this.
Jim Herd makes one of the stupidest management decisions in wrestling history.
Not yet.
Oh, that's not
this
here?
is earlier. This is 1990. We're still a year. Yeah, like we're still a year from Flair leaving. But yeah, like things cool off, and they agree. Like, okay, Flair, you'll go over tonight. You can keep the belt, but like, writing's on the wall here.
Yeah. And they go another year with this shit.
Yeah,
fuck.
I mean, he's been flirting with the WWF for a long time. Like, almost jumped in 88, was going to show up on that first SummerSlam and got cold feet at the last second.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a long time coming here, but yeah. Sting is back for the Bash 1990, beats Flair to win the WCW title. Should be the start of a great run for Sting. Instead, he gets stuck feuding with the Black Scorpion, which we did something that had the Black Scorpion on. We did like a Clash of the Champions, or we did a Clash and a Halloween Havoc, I think, that had the Scorpion.
Yeah, we definitely did the one with the spaceship. That's
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so Halloween Havoc 90, Sting retains against Sid Vicious. Starrcade, Sting beats the Black Scorpion in a steel cage match and unmasked him to reveal that he was Ric Flair. They got to Starrcade and still really didn't know who it was going to be. And Flair says he kind of stepped up and was like, I'll do it. He says it was because, like, he didn't want like Barry Windham or anybody else to have to deal with kind of the stink of that storyline.
Yeah,
would this have hurt Barry Windham? I don't know. I still feel like it kind of would have elevated him.
Yeah, at least it would have given him some personality. But at the time, yeah, like it was getting shit on so hard that I kind of get that.
Yeah, Flair just knows he's bulletproof. He'll just move on. Like once he's revealed, it's just dropped and really never talked about again.
Right, and at least it makes some semblance of storyline sense that, like, all right, well, Flair wants his title back. I kind of get it.
Yeah, he just did it to fuck with Sting.
Right.
So Flair won the title from Sting at a house show in East Rutherford on January 11th, just a couple weeks after Starrcade. This is when they start calling the belt the WCW World Heavyweight Championship instead of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. They're functionally the same thing. They're still using the NWA belt. And at least in theory, the NWA board of directors still have to approve title changes, but like we're heading towards the split of WCW and the NWA.
When is that official? When does that split actually happen?
Here. The split with Flair is the split because the NWA doesn't strip Flair right away.
Got it.
Yeah, they let Flair keep the belt for a little while because they're hoping he's going to go work the territories, whatever those are at this point.
I don't think so, guys.
Yeah. Flair's not going to work Memphis. That's about all that's left. So just after this, things are already bumpy between Flair and management. It gets even worse when Dusty Rhodes returns from the WWF and becomes part of the booking committee. Like, Dusty and Flair have had issues going back a long time, as we talked about. Dusty really tried to humiliate Flair, have him get squashed by Rick Steiner. Like, Flair is not trusting Dusty as booker. He's not feeling good about that.
It's just been the two alpha males of the NWA the entire time it's been national. I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah. A fun oddity, they do the first WCW New Japan Super Show in Tokyo on March 21st, airs in the USA on April 21st on pay-per-view. This is where they do a controversial finish between Flair and Tatsumi Fujinami. It's WCW champion against IWGP champion. Fujinami wins the belt, beats Flair, but prior to pinning him, throws him over the top rope, which under WCW rules is a disqualification, but not New Japan rules. So this is a hot finish. The WCW title is in theory still contested. They come back for Super Brawl in May with Flair Fujinami 2, and Flair wins to become the undisputed WCW champion. Like, a really strange thing to do to have Fujinami in your main event, and I haven't seen the TV leading up to it, but I doubt they did a good job building him up in America.
Absolutely certain that they didn't, because they never have any other time before.
No, like, I doubt anyone really knew who he was.
Those things were like, okay, the storyline that you've created makes sense for this to happen, but your fans don't know who this is. And like, you might be so insular within your own little world that you may think that they do, but like, they don't, man. Like, not even close. It would be like, all right, the main event of this next pay-per-view is Seth Rollins versus, God, who's the NXT champion right now? Adam Cole. Yeah. And it just be like, all right, well, half of your audience has no fucking idea who that is.
So we're coming up to Great American Bash now. Hurd wants Flair to drop the belt to Lex Luger. Flair doesn't particularly want to do it. And to add to the complications, Flair gives his 30-day notice in late June, just a couple weeks before the Bash. He has another year on his contract, but there's also a clause that either side can terminate the deal with 30 days notice. WCW also wants to terminate him because they want him to take about a 50% pay cut.
50%, dude.
Yeah. His deal apparently guarantees him something like 700 to 750K a year, which is probably too much money for where this company is at this point. Like, they probably shouldn't have anyone making that much, but they want to drop him down to 350. Whereas like Sting and Luger are both up in the 700 range and like don't have the escape clause that Flair's contract has. So like Flair and Luger are going to be making twice as much, or Sting and Luger are going to be making twice as much as Flair. And like that's obviously not sustainable.
It's a pretty clear statement of where they see the future going, and it's not Rick.
No, they're telling him we don't want you anymore. So it's not that there's nothing wrong with trying to cut costs. Like this company's losing millions of dollars. They've got to cut salaries. Right. But trying to cut your star player in half and have him go from being the top paid guy to like, I don't know, maybe outside of the top 10. Do you think there's 10 guys making over 350?
No. Looking at this roster, I'd struggle to find more than 5 that were probably making high enough money for that, unless they're like old timers that were grandfathered in.
But still, to have him making 40% less than your other top stars is a big problem.
It's more than that, too, because it's an intentional slap in the face.
Yeah.
Because it's not in no business and nowhere are you ever asked to give up half of your salary. Like if you are getting paid well more than your company can afford, that's not your fault. That's the company's fault. And they have a choice of generally getting rid of you completely with some severance or like trying to negotiate or just dealing with it because you're so valuable to them. Like, I don't know how they thought that. They can't have thought that he would accept this. There's just no way.
No, but to me, this is just so simple. He doesn't want to be there. You don't want him. Let him leave. Just have him drop the title and fucking leave. Like, I don't know if you didn't want to put Luger over. Have him put Sting over. Like,
have Sting put Luger over. That's what you want. Just
I mean, the other thing I want to bring up is how many parallels are there between this and Bret Hart and the WWF in 1997?
Good.
Yeah, like there are many, many parallels there. And I think this is part of what informed Vince McMahon's decision-making around that.
Yeah, because like the decision that Jim Herd makes is, all right, just get the fuck out of here, which is like not the one Vince makes because Vince is like, no, I got to get the belt off him because he'll do what Flair did. He'll just take it.
Also, Bret almost left the WWF in 92 with the Intercontinental title, which everybody kind of glosses over.
Everybody just kind of pretends that shit didn't happen, even though it would have broken the world had it actually gone through.
Yeah, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bret wouldn't have shown up with the belt on their TV." It's like he was gonna do it back then.
It was literally revenge for this. Like that was.
Guys, come on, read your history. He kind of glosses over that in his book.
Of course, he does.
Doesn't mind talking about all the women he cheated on his wife with, but like this, he doesn't want to bring up because it undermines his credibility in Montreal.
I was always loyal to Vince. I didn't have it coming at all.
This is what's actually important to Bret, like much more important to Bret Hart than anything else is like that he's like the good guy in the screw job. So negotiations over the contract break down in early July. Herd inexplicably fires Flair rather than having him lose the title on the way out. Just what an insane and moronic thing to do. You destroy the credibility of your title. Whoever your new champion is going to be a paper champion because they never beat Flair for the title.
I want to say that this is just an example of him not understanding the wrestling business enough to know that like fans take belts seriously. Enough to know that like this will literally weaken the drawing power of the people on your show. Like I want to believe that he didn't know, but in truth, it's pretty clearly just something he did hot-headed one day when he got pissed at Flair. He's like, you know what? Just get the fuck out. We'll just be fine. And like, you can't do that. You just can't.
So there was discussion of having Flair lose the title at a house show to Barry Windham before the pay-per-view. Again, very similar to proposals we heard about, like, what if Bret just loses the belt to, like, Shamrock at a house show before Survivor Series? Doesn't happen because they fire Flair. Monday, July 1st. The Great American Bash is July 14th. So we've got less than 2 weeks until the pay-per-view. They're taping TV like that day, I think. It was like that day or the next day they were doing their TV taping. So like they've got like a day to throw their shit together and figure out what they're doing for the pay-per-view.
And what they choose is dumb and bad.
Yeah. So they taped TV in Macon, Georgia to air that Saturday, July 6th. They announce Flair's been stripped of the title due to contractual issues. The new main event for the Great American Bash will be Lex Luger versus Barry Windham for the vacant title. Barry Windham, I think, was going to be in the tag match against the Steiners. Like, it was going to be him and Anderson and Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, against both Steiners and Missy Hyatt. And then Scott got hurt and got pulled out of the match. And then Windham got thrown into this other match. But they're really kind of plucking Barry Windham out of the mid-card and throwing him in the main event here.
Do we both agree that they just should have put Sting in this match?
Yeah, I would have just forget the Sting, Nikolai Volkov, Nikita Koloff Russian chain match. I think we can live without that.
I mean, you put Sting in this match, and even if you keep everything else the same,
or you can do like a tournament and have that be one of the matches in the Eliminator, and Sting wins it and he goes on to fight for the title.
What I would love is if this was like a tournament and Luger and Sting, best friends, both babyface, meet in the finals, and Luger turns heel to beat him. That's great. Yeah. That gives you something to build on.
But yeah, having Luger instead turn heel on Barry Windham, who like is already a heel, doesn't do anything for you.
We'll get to. He doesn't really turn heel.
No, not exactly. To make things even juicier, the WCW and NWA title aren't really the same thing at this point. This is where you have to detach title from belt. Physically, it's the same belt. It's the big gold belt. But the NWA has a board of directors and they recognize a champion, and WCW is an organization, technically a subsidiary of the NWA. WCW is really what matters because that's the name on the brand, that's the TV, but the NWA still wants to feel important. The NWA board of directors declines to strip Flair of the title because they're hopeful he's going to go wrestle in territories and kind of bring some new life into the very few remaining territories.
Also, I'm sure they really didn't want to pay him that money back.
Yeah, okay, so we got to get into the belt. We got to get into the deposit. Yeah. So in these days, when you are going to win the title, you have to put a $25,000 deposit down. It's collateral to ensure you cannot leave without doing the job. For someone like Flair, who wins and loses this belt constantly, he just left the money on deposit. Like, he doesn't really need the $25,000 at this point. He's making that like every single week. He just leaves it in the bank account. It accrues interest. It's up to, I read, $38,000 by this point. Because I think it's basically been on deposit since like 1982 when he first won the title. That's a whole lot of money they owe him. And Jim Herd decides to fuck with Flair and refuses to give him back the deposit.
And see, here's the thing, is that if you have Flair lose the belt and then he just never wins it again, you don't owe him that money necessarily. Maybe he never asks for it.
He says he never got it back.
Yeah. Eventually you have to pay him like when he retires. But he probably would have just left that on deposit until he thought he would actually need it. Whereas if you strip him, you owe him that shit now.
Yeah. Because
now the belt, you're essentially asking for the belt back. So you owe him the money that he paid for it. The NWA in 1991, spoiler alert, I don't think it had $38,000.
No. No, I don't know where they were getting that from. Under the mattresses of the promoters, I guess. So Flair refuses to give the belt back, sends it to Vince McMahon, and we get the real world's heavyweight champion storyline and the litigation that ensues as part of that, as they will violate WCW's intellectual property by bringing the belt onto WWF TV. But what a moment that is to have the NWA champion show up on WWF TV.
It's amazing it's not a bigger moment in wrestling history, honestly.
Yeah. And when Flair wins the WWF title, like, he's the first, like, true undisputed world champion since the 60s, since, like, Buddy Rogers, I guess.
I mean, that's real.
Like, I don't remember, but yeah.
Like, he technically owns both titles. He is the represented champion of WWF and the NWA. It's crazy.
Yeah, he's the lineal NWA champion. He was never beaten for the belt.
And then when he goes back, technically he still is, really.
Yeah. So since this is 1991, you have to understand the ads promoting Luger and Flair continue to run all the way up to the pay-per-view because, like, they can't pull those out of circulation.
If you go and look at the Wikipedia page right now, it's Flair versus Luger on the poster. They never made another poster.
No, there was no time. There's no time to get all the posters back and replace them. Some pre-taped segments on the syndicated shows promoting Flair versus Luger still make air too, because just they've got so much syndicated TV at this point that they can't. It's just too much of a logistical nightmare to get it all edited out and replaced with other stuff. It's just a very different time.
And I mean, promoters have struggled with this same kind of thing even up to this day, when it's a lot easier to get the word out quicker. But at that time, like, how would you even begin to get the word out? How would you even, like, get in contact with each individual TV network that are scattered across the country? Because pay-per-view providers work totally different then. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, this is the era where they're sending the pay-per-view stuff like months in advance. Yeah, they're sending cutting their pay-per-view ads and the posters and everything. They're getting that out months in advance. So, like, this is a pretty common occurrence that, like, they've got one plan for what the main event. Like, I'm sure they had Sting Flair promoted for the previous pay-per-views, but then Sting got hurt and couldn't do the matches. Like, this is just something that happened a lot back then.
Absolutely.
I mean, into the 90s and 2000s, you'd have cases where, like, a guy would be on the poster and he wouldn't actually be on the pay-per-view because he would be hurt.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's why, like, WWE. That's literally why WWE started doing those posters. Just have, like, one dude on it. Like, they just stopped promoting matches on posters. They just stopped doing that.
Yeah, and this is something interesting Bischoff said on his podcast that, like, made all the sense in the world to me when he said it. Was the way he explained it was because they couldn't really promote matches for pay-per-views in that way. He felt like the shows themselves had to be the characters. And, like, that explains so much about WCW's pay-per-views. And what makes them so cool is that they have these themes.
Oh, God, yeah. Like, Halloween Havoc on its own is, like, such incredible. Like, the draw was Halloween Havoc. The draw was Starrcade.
Bash the Beach, Slamboree, like, just sold out. Yeah, every single pay-per-view was different and, like, meant something. It was identifiable. Whereas today, what does Stomping Ground mean?
Hell, I swear to God.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of the end for Jim Herd. He lasts until the end of the year and resigns in January 1992. But when you run off the company's top star and fuck over your title belt in the process, you're not going to last much longer. All right, so to get into the show, it's July 14th, 1991, at the Baltimore Civic Arena in Baltimore, Maryland, which was really, always the home of the Great American Bash. I think from 88 through, like, the late 90s, always Baltimore. Baltimore Civic Arena, famous wrestling venue. Superstar Billy Graham won the WWF title there. Big building for the WWF, for Jim Crockett Promotions. Maryland is always interesting because it's just kind of disputed territory. Like, WWF would run shows there and Crockett would too.
It's literally and figuratively, because literally that's where the Mason-Dixie line is in Maryland.
Yeah. There's about 7,000 in attendance, 5,500 paid for a gate of just under $100,000. Not close to full, like a little over half, I think. I think it's more like 13,000, 14,000 is capacity there. It looks full on TV, but I'm pretty sure they just put everybody on the hard camera side.
It's a good looking crowd. And, like, The interesting thing about it to me is that they go out of their way to show the crowd so many times.
Yeah.
Like the opening video, which is one of the weirdest opening videos I've ever seen, which is from the point of view of a fan walking into the arena and paying for his tickets and like walking to his seat, is like the most disinterested I've ever seen a group of people be in a television camera.
Yeah, that was a very like I didn't hate that as an opening, but it was strange. Like I've never
Right.
quite seen that before.
If they'd been like, super excited, it would have made the show look good. But literally, it's just people being like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine doing this for like Madison Square Garden and how awesome that would feel.
Fuck yeah. I mean, they used to do this for like WWE New York and shit like that all the time, and people be like losing their shit because a producer prepped them ahead of time. It literally felt like they didn't tell any of these people they were going to be on film. They just like had a camera walk slowly through and go in.
Does about a 1.0 buy rate, which is about 145,000 buys. Not a great number. They had done 200,000 the previous year for Sting versus Flair, but under the circumstances, 145,000, not the worst.
Not bad at all, honestly,
Yeah,
especially for as much of a train wreck as this was. I wonder how many people bought it not knowing that that Flair wasn't going to be here.
Yeah, that's another good question. Is how many people actually knew? Did everybody know that this had happened?
I seriously doubt it.
Yeah,
I mean, how would they have found out?
If you saw the TV, but if you just missed like those one or two segments, like you had no idea.
That's crazy.
So our opening match, a scaffold match, as PN News and Bobby Eaton take on Steve Austin and Terrence Taylor.
Steve,
sweet Jesus.
Let's stop right here. A scaffold match is the opener to this show between people who are not in a feud. I mean, I guess Austin and Eaton are kind of feuding.
I hate scaffold matches. Scaffold matches are the worst thing in wrestling.
The only reason scaffold matches were ever invented was for feuds that were so hot that the crowd felt like someone had to die for it to end. And like that was the appeal. It's like we're gonna go down to the wrestling and the fucking Midnight Express are gonna die.
Yeah. And yeah, scaffold matches in this territory are legendary because Jim Cornette destroyed his fucking knees falling off a scaffold at Starrcade 86.
Yeah, people actually took these bumps.
Yeah.
But it's like Hell in a Cell. It's a lot stupider than Hell in a Cell, but that's the comparison. Like, this was the feud ender. This was the ultimate. But like, if nobody's going to take the bump, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. So you win this match. You can win by knocking someone off the scaffold, but it's also a capture the flag match, and you just have to get the other team's flag to win, and that's how it ends.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing interesting here. Everyone's moving so slowly because they're terrified, except PN News, who is not afraid at all.
Yeah, that fat fuck is flying up there.
Yeah, running around and like trying to tiptoe around guys. And like Austin's like on his belly the whole time. He's like, no, thank you.
Yeah, not happening. So yeah, Austin is stunning Steve Austin here. Got the long blonde hair, the Ric Flair robe. He's the TV champion. He's backed up by Lady Blossom, who is Jeannie Clark, his first wife, the one responsible for inspiring Stone Cold when she told him to drink his tea before it got stone cold and the wheels turned in his head.
And then there's Terrence Taylor in full Bobby Roode mode.
Yeah. No
literally wearing the jacket he gave Bobby Roode to wear.
Can we talk about how great Bobby Roode's mustache is?
Oh my God, it's legendary. Oh, they should have fucking put the belt on him already.
That stash makes him a top guy.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
I am so glad we're on the same page about this.
He's the stepdad you weren't supposed to worry about, but your mom just can't resist him. Terry Taylor is a heel. He's part of the York Foundation, which is a group of like rich wrestlers managed by Alexandra York, who is Terry Runnels. He's billed as the computerized man of the 1990s.
Oh, I would say that hasn't aged well, but it wasn't good at the time either.
Should mention commentary tonight. Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. What'd you think of them together?
It's sort of awkward, but I kind of like them together. Like Shivani kind of brings out a playful side of JR that he did not have during this time.
No, JR very, very serious at this time.
Shivani plays enough of the straight man that like JR kind of gets more personality out than he usually does. Though really the only segment where they have any personality is when they're like, boy, I sure wish I would have seen Missy Hyatt's tits. Yeah, me too.
That sure did happen.
Yeah, sure did.
Shivani questions why Austin is willing to be part of this match while TV champion, which is a very good question.
Very good point, Tony. Well, thanks for bringing that up.
There's a lot of Tony Schiavone being like too honest that happens on these shows.
Yeah. We're like, he's literally just like, well, that's stupid. Why would he do that?
That didn't make any damn sense.
Why is he doing that? Does anybody know, JR? And JR just being like, shut the fuck up. We got to toe the company line, buddy.
PN News is a big, fat, light rapper. He can't really rap at all, and he was a terrible wrestler who was really dangerous in the ring and constantly hurt people.
More than Ahmed Johnson levels. Like, we're off that chart.
Yeah, I think he eventually got fired because he just hit somebody with like a legit splash and fucked them up after he'd been warned about it.
See that match where he just like
I
squat like he like
did. I remember talking about this.
Yeah, because his feet slipped when he went to like do it, and he just like pancaked the guy.
Yeah, and this dude's like 350 pounds. He's a big guy.
Like, and he sucks so much. Like, this may be the best match of his career.
The scaffold looks like it's 2 or 3 feet wide. Like, there's nothing you can do up there.
Yeah, like this looks even more rickety than other scaffolds too. Like in the mid '80s when they were doing it in darkened arenas, like it still felt like a better constructed platform than this. This looks terrible.
Yeah, it's terrifying just watching them. Like obviously this match happened like almost 30 years ago, but watching it today, I'm scared for them up there. Imagine what it feels like to be Steve Austin up there on that fucking scaffold.
Imagine what it feels like to be someone with an actual future in the wrestling business, being like, no. And like Austin, for like the last half of the match, Austin never advances more than halfway across the scaffold, ever. No. He's not fucking around.
For a lot of this, they're just kind of laying there. Like, there's nothing they can do.
Like, Eaton's up on his feet, and he's like, he's ready to do spots, and everybody else is just like, fuck you, Eaton. I don't care what you do.
Shivani explains that the previous matches used a metal base rather than wood, so this hurts less, which is not something I would have brought up.
Also, it means it's ricketier.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about? That means it could break.
Eaton grabs the opposing flag. Apparently, he has to make it back to the other end, which he does. And it feels like the competitors just like threw in the towel on this match. Like, I think they just called it.
Yeah. Like, it genuinely does. I feel like Steve's like slipped one time. It was like, no, call it. We're done. This isn't happening.
So, Lady Blossom hands Austin powder. He throws it in Eaton's eyes. No one reacts. It seems like the match is going to continue, but then eventually they just announce PN News and Eaton are the winners.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that Eaton never actually goes back to his side with the flag. He goes halfway and then comes back and starts beating him up with the flag.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, he never actually wins the match.
Who cares?
Doesn't matter. Like, blessedly, it's over. This is some of the most boring shit you can possibly watch.
Yeah, this was, I don't know, this probably went 7 minutes, but it felt like a lot more.
Yes, it
did. Next, making his WCW pay-per-view debut, Eric Bischoff interviews Paul E. Dangerously and Arn Anderson. They'll be competing tonight in a steel cage match against Rick Steiner and Missy Hyatt. Arn cuts a pretty great promo where he's like, if you're going to lock us in cages and treat us like criminals, then we're going to act like criminals, and there's going to be an aggravated assault in that ring tonight.
Is Arn Anderson a top 5 promo of all time?
Man, I don't think he usually comes up when we talk about the best because he doesn't have a lot of He doesn't. There's no Arn Anderson like hard times promo, but he was just consistently so great.
Most of his promos were just like one-liners before he
Yeah.
handed them to Flair, but like he was just always on, always
Yeah.
perfect. He
I,
said exactly what he'd said.
yeah, I can quote a lot of Arn Anderson promos, just those great snappy lines.
He just had such great timing. Like that's
Yeah.
something you can't teach.
And he was just so serious and credible. And like, yeah, when he says they're gonna mess somebody up, like you believe it. He looks like he can do it.
Which is funny because he's about to get squashed.
We go back to Ross and Shivani, and they have to stall for time because they're taking the scaffold down. So this is kind of where we get the intro to the show, and they're going over all the matches that are happening tonight.
Hold on.
And we get our first "We Want Flair" "We Want Flair" chant of the show.
Certainly not the last. Certainly not.
Next match, we've got the Diamond Stud against the Z-Man, Tom Zenk. The Diamond Stud, of course, is Scott Hall, managed by Diamond Dallas Page. What a duo.
Let me just say this, the second I saw the Diamond Stud walk out with Diamond Dallas Page, I said, oh, cool. I have my paint a word picture for this show. It's right here, what these two are wearing. This is ridiculous. I need you to understand that this is not going to be it because something better comes literally in the next batch. I just need you to know that because they look so ridiculous, but even then, it's not enough.
Page gets on the mic before the match, cuts a little promo, says that the Diamond Stud is 260 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. That he is.
By the way, Scott Hall is looking unbelievable here.
He looks way better than his Razor Ramon here.
Yeah, because he's slimmed down to be Razor, so he's kind of lanky. But here, he's just like a brick shithouse. Like, it's ridiculous.
He's not quite as big as like he was in the AWA with that like cowboy Scott Hall gimmick, but he's kind of in between and looking fantastic.
And literally, like, he looks like a main event star.
Yeah, got the long, slick-backed black hair, like very much the Razor Ramon gimmick without the name here. I don't understand how they didn't push him. Like, it's all right there.
With Page, and like, look, Diamond Dallas Page is great eventually, but like here, he's not Diamond Dallas Page yet. Like, they're wasting him by putting him with Page. Like, he should be somewhere in the main event, being managed by like Harley Race or like some like part of the the Dangerous Alliance or something like that. It's like to make him literally his name is the Diamond Stud. He has no character beyond that. It's that like he's kind of doing Razor Ramon, but he never gets to talk. He never does anything. It's just there's nothing here. It's an empty gimmick.
No, and he's in the WWF by summer '92. Like, they just kind of let him go.
Literally, it's like not even on the shows. Like, they're not using him. They don't see anything in him somehow.
He'd have to be blind.
Exactly. Fuck.
This guy is like 6'5", 250 pounds, in incredible shape, looks great, has charisma, can talk, is a great worker.
He's a
couldn't
former
have put
world
together a better prospect. 5'2" player.
Yeah. Like, literally, this guy has been a world champion somewhere else. Like, so few members of your roster can you say that about. Fuck.
Z-Man, Tom Zenk out second. He's got a bunch of girls with him.
One of the funniest shots of the whole show was they pan over to Zenk, who is clearly waiting for his cue to start walking down the ramp. Yeah. So he's just standing there with like 6 girls on his arm. He's like, oh, now? Yay! Yeah.
Tom Zenk, I hope you're listening. No, he's dead. Shit, that's right. I forgot he died.
I mean, Tom Zenk, I was originally contacted by because he saw a nice thing that I've said about him once, and he wanted to let me know that he appreciated it.
What a nice guy.
Yeah, it's lovely. It may have been his brother or something, actually. It was a really creepy interaction. Let's not talk ill of the dead.
Hall should have
Zenk, though, because he looks like $1 million too.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom Zenk, he was one of those guys who just couldn't stay out of trouble behind the scenes because, yeah, he never got the push it seemed like he should have.
Yeah, I mean, he's got everything that you want. Like, he basically looks like the American Rick Martel here, and like he's getting nothing for it.
Hall works an abdominal stretch and uses the ropes for leverage. Zenk gets out, but he gets caught with a choke slam. Zenk comes back with a missile drop kick off the top rope. Page gets involved, gets dragged into the ring by his hair. Hall uses the distraction to hit a belly to back suplex into a bridging pin to get the win.
That is the most technical maneuver I've ever seen Scott Hall use.
Yeah, not a whole lot to that match.
Yeah. I mean, it was what it was. Like 9 minutes, a lot longer than I thought that match was gonna go.
Yeah.
But like they both look like future stars. Like both Greens, both still putting it together, but like they're like, all right, these are two guys who are gonna be a big deal pretty soon. And they're both fucking gone in like a year.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Ron Simmons versus Oz. Yes.
Oh my
Oz.
god. Oh my
Kevin
god.
Nash as a giant wizard.
Okay, this is where the word picture gets painted. Here we go. All right, so we pan over, and before we're introduced to the fact that it's about to be Oz or anything, we just suddenly get a static shot of a castle that has suddenly appeared on the ramp, which was empty before. And my initial reaction is, oh shit, they actually built a set for him? And then suddenly a curtain gets yanked back and the whole thing ripples, showing that it's just like painted on a sheet. And I was like, oh, I felt stupid for thinking that was real. And out comes Kevin Nash, wearing old man makeup, wearing a giant Santa Claus beard, and wearing a voluminous green cape extending 5 feet out from his shoulders. He looks like Super Shredder's grandpa. And it is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And then a tiny man in another beard comes trotting out in front of him. Who was that guy?
That was Kevin Sullivan.
That was Kevin Sullivan?
Yeah, the Great Wizard.
Oh my god.
Isn't Kevin Sullivan on this show later as himself too?
Yes.
Yeah.
2 different matches, yes.
Double pay.
Triple pay, I guess. But he looks like an Oompa Loompa. Like, especially since he's standing next to Kevin Nash. And like, none of this makes sense. They spend like $10,000 on pyro, but it's the saddest pyro ever. Literally, as he walks by, it just goes pew,
yeah,
pew.
I mean, I thought this was kind of a cool entrance, like coming through. Yeah, this was advanced for 1991.
Okay, I'll give you that. Like, it's like if you tried to do the Undertaker's entrance, but instead of dark and creepy, you were going for campy and ridiculous.
JR really tries to put Oz over. You can't really do it. Notably, it's on JR's radio show that Nash kind of first showed that he could talk and had charisma. JR would have him on a lot, and this is where kind of Nash's promo ability was discovered.
Like, the Oz thing came... What's the backstory on Oz? Because wasn't it because like Turner
bought the rights to the Wizard of Oz, and they wanted to do some product integration?
Like, if you're gonna have somebody play a character like this, isn't it unimaginably stupid to pick like, hey, we just got a 7-foot badass in, let's put the stupid gimmick on him?
Yeah, and like Oz is the man behind the curtain. Wouldn't he be a manager?
Yes. The fucking wizard is Oz.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Not that would have been good either, but it would have spared Kevin Nash this indignity.
I think the Dusty Rhodes never saw the Wizard of Oz, and he just saw like the great powerful Oz. He's like, oh, so all right, Kevin Nash then.
God. Simmons is out second to a pretty good pop. Got two former college athletes going at it here. We've got Nash, a former center for the Tennessee Volunteers basketball team. Simmons, a former nose tackle at Florida State, one of the great college football players of all time, multi-time All-American, number retired at Florida State, inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Like, absolute
real deal.
Star.
One of the top 5 athletes that's ever been a professional wrestler. Like, it's just straight up.
Not much happening here. Nash does not really know what he's doing. How many matches has he probably had at this point? Probably less than 50 in his career.
That, yeah, absolutely.
Like he's not working a whole lot at this point.
Barely cycled over the steroids by this point. Like, it doesn't even look like it yet.
Nash takes a really nice bump over the top when he gets a clothesline. And he comes back with some really slow offense, axe handles, chokes, that kind of thing. We get some 3-point stance clotheslines and a shoulder block to get the win for Simmons. A pretty bad match, but how good could it really have been?
And that's the thing, like you spend all this money on entrances and stuff for Oz, but you put it on a green dude who can't do anything with it. Not that really anybody could have done anything with Oz, but like, what were you trying to get out of it? Because now, like, he's done. He lost. Like, he's kind of done now, right?
And then we get maybe my favorite part of the show as they announce the WCW Top 10. I'm such a sucker for these ranking systems. I was super excited when SmackDown started doing it a couple of years ago, and then they just dropped it after like one time.
I know why they dropped this stuff, because they're like, we feel beholden to the list that we've made. We got to take it like it's a shoot or something.
Why do they get trapped in that? Pro wrestling is a work. Like,
it's so ridiculous. Like, you can just you decide what goes on the list.
Yeah.
Like, that's you. Like, you don't.
If you're just going to get somebody in the main event, have him beat a bunch of people to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's even better. Like, now you can justify putting anyone in the main event. You can be like, well, number 10 right now is Samoa Joe. He hasn't been doing so well, but he beat number 2. Instant title shot. Yeah. Like, so easy.
And like, such an easy way to create feuds, because it's just like, Arn Anderson is number 6 and Bobby Eaton is number 5. Well, if they wrestle each other, that's a big match because the winner is going to be one step closer to a title match.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we're about 4 weeks from Starrcade, and it looks like Sting's in the number 1 position, but oh no, Vader has decided to kill him to get that spot.
So the top 10, number 10 is Johnny B. Bad, number 9 is Ron Simmons, number 8 is the Diamond Stud, number 7 is El Gigante, number 6, Arn Anderson, number 5, Bobby Eaton, number 4, Steve Austin, number 3 is Sting, number 2 is Barry Windham, and number 1, Lex Luger. Luger had already been kind of number 1 because he was the U.S. champion and was going to wrestle Flair here. Windham, I think they just dropped into the number 2 spot out of nowhere because he was going to have this pay-per-view title match.
While I do love this top 10, what it also does is illustrate how absolutely non-existent their upper mid-card was.
It's pretty thin.
They have like a lot of guys with potential, a lot of old irrelevant dudes, and then like Sting and Luger. That's it.
Next up, Richard Morton versus Robert Gibson. The Rock and Roll Express explode.
Ooh.
Yes, they actually tried to turn Ricky Morton heel. He's in the York Foundation with Alexandra York managing him.
Here's what bothers me, okay, is that, like, if you're going to break up the Rock and Roll Express, you don't pick Ricky to turn heel. Yeah. He's the one who gets the sympathy.
Yeah, I don't understand why Gibson didn't turn heel.
The format to every Rock and Roll Express match, and I'll save you some time because there are thousands of them, is Ricky Morton gets his ass kicked with no offense for 10 straight minutes, and then Robert Gibson comes in for the hot tag that everyone goes wild for, then they do a double drop kick and go home. Boom. I just gave you every match.
Taking the heat is literally called playing Ricky Morton.
Yes. And they turned him heel.
Yeah.
So that leads to this match where Ricky Morton's got to be on offense the whole time and he only knows 3 moves.
Just works the knee for 15 minutes straight.
Jesus.
Yeah. Just knee heat goes on forever. Eventually Morton grabs a laptop, smashes it on Gibson's head, and that gets the win for Morton. A very, very dull match.
It's just not good. Like, it's not even close to good. It's a bummer.
Yeah, this was just terribly ill-advised. After that, a 6-man tag match as Dusty Rhodes and the Young Pistols take on the Fabulous Freebirds, who here are represented by Michael Hayes, Jimmy Jam Garvin, and Badstreet, who is Brad Armstrong under a mask.
Not just a mask, but in a whole goofy-ass costume. He looks like he's trying to be like a luchador, but like nobody bought like a real luchador outfit, so he's just wearing like a Halloween costume. And he does not fit with the Freebirds at all.
They've got Oliver Humperdinck, a.k.a. Big Daddy Dink, backing them up.
Big Daddy Dink is solid. That's a solid name.
Big fan of Big Daddy Dink. Absolutely. The Freebirds are both the WCW six-man tag champions and the United States tag champions. I don't think either of those belts lasted much longer after this show.
They just kind of stayed with the Freebirds during this whole period.
A whole lot of stalling from the Freebirds. I should say the Young Pistols are Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong, who is, yes, we got two Armstrong brothers duking it out here. The Freebirds get the advantage when Badstreet gets a cheap shot behind the referee's back. This is an elimination match. We go over 10 minutes with no eliminations, and then they start coming real fast.
Yeah, the Michael Hayes one.
First, Hayes and Badstreet get a double DDT on Armstrong. He gets pinned, so he's out. Hayes throws Armstrong over the top rope, and he gets disqualified. Smothers is pinned with a roll-up, but then Rhodes blasts Garvin with a lariat and pins him. We're down to Rhodes and Badstreet. There's a bulldog by Rhodes, and he hits Dink with a drop kick while doing it, which was pretty cool.
Yes, very cool.
And he gets the pin. A longer match than it probably needed to be, but wasn't too bad.
No, I mean, in terms of like actual wrestling, this was the best match on the show. Is that probably fair to say?
Yeah, probably.
Like, that said, it wasn't very enjoyable, and it damn sure wasn't memorable to any extent.
No. Next up, we've got the Yellow Dog against Johnny B. Bad. The Yellow Dog is Brian Pillman, who lost a Loser Leaves WCW match and came back under a mask. This is one of my favorite old cheesy wrestling storylines. I get into this every time they do it.
This is such like a Florida thing. Like, this is the Florida thing. Or like
Dusty Rhodes, Midnight Rider.
Just did it. Like, it's just such a thing in old school territory wrestling. Because back then, like, you wouldn't really know like that was the person under the mask. You'd just be like, hey, that guy kind of looks like with Dusty, you probably knew, because who looks like Dusty Rhodes? But if it's like Austin Idol, you're like, is that really him? I don't really know. And then it's like a mystery, and then you find out.
I love when they did this with Hogan, Mr. America.
I think you're the only one, buddy. I think you're the only one.
What about when they did it with the Miz? It should have lasted longer. It only lasted like a week when he was the Canada Kid or whatever, but that should have lasted longer.
Oh, yeah. Or when Edge and Christian were the Conquistadors.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a long, proud tradition of this.
This is not part of it.
This is not part of it, no.
Oh, man. So this is where I should note, I had previously seen this show, and it was a rip of the VHS tape. And on the network, they edited out a part where Pillman looks into the camera and yells, "More like Johnny B. Gay," during his entrance.
Now, this is a podcast, so it's an audio medium. So you can't see me sighing and shaking my head right now, but that's what's happening.
Oh, this is the pay-per-view debut for Johnny B. Bad, who was in wrestling for a while. Like, I always thought of Mark Miro as like a young guy and a new wrestler, like watching him in the WWF in the late 90s. But no, he had been around for years at that point. He just sucked.
Yeah, man, he wasn't green. He was just terrible. He just couldn't tell at the time.
He sadly does not have his awesome entrance theme with the lyrics yet. It's just kind of generic rock and roll music.
On the show sucks. Like, it's really bad.
I don't know if maybe this was dubbed in.
It's entirely possible. I just don't know what music they would have been using at the time. But like, it's just it's all really, and it's like toned down. Like, you can barely hear it.
Yeah, I don't think they were still using like licensed music I mean, they were never paying for it, but I don't think they were still. I think by this point they'd phased out though, like just using people's songs without paying royalties for it.
Yeah, I think that they were just genuinely
just garbage.
Had bad production on this show. Like, which match is the one where like literally the feed
It's
just
this
goes
one.
out.
Yeah, the picture goes out for a little bit here, which is one of these really like random, interesting things about watching these WCW shows on the network from this era. Is sometimes like they just lost the feed and like they can't recover it.
Thing on the bottom that just says, "Sorry, we can only show you."
This shit. If the yellow dog is revealed to be Brian Pillman, he will be banned from WCW forever. Bad is trying to unmask him. Dog then wins by DQ when Bad accidentally throws him over the top rope. I don't hate that over the top rope DQ rule, but like, did they have to do it on every show?
And like twice on this show.
Yeah, that was the thing. It just became such a crutch.
And it's like it also doesn't make logical sense to me. Like, I don't understand what the purpose of that rule is in the kayfabe fiction. Like,
it's just to protect the wrestlers. If you can throw them over the top rope, you're going to hurt them really badly.
I get the idea of like not coming off the top. Like, it's like that'll hurt him too bad. You can't do that. And then somebody starts doing it and gets over. Get that. The over the top rope, though, that doesn't make any sense to me. Especially since Ron Simmons knocks. You mentioned earlier that Ron Simmons coolly knocks off over the top rope. Not once, but twice. No repercussions.
I would love them trying to explain why that wasn't a DQ when it would happen. I'd be like, oh, they're going to say his own lever, his own momentum took him over the top rope.
Where in that case, he tried to get Kevin Nash over the top rope the first time, failed, and then went, huh, and then went back and just mega clotheslined him over.
Yeah.
It's obvious that the rest didn't give a shit about that rule.
No, I mean, they're not calling the match like it's a shoot. Like, that's a stupid thing that comes later in the WWF where they're like, oh, if somebody actually messes up, you should actually disqualify them.
Yes. Oh, my God. I will never get over that.
Well, shit, the main event of WrestleMania this year. They were apparently mad at the referee because he counted Ronda's shoulders down when they weren't down. Like, that was the finish of the match. I guess he wasn't supposed to count.
Which is madness, because, like, people at first were just like, oh, well, that was weird. Who gives a shit? Becky won!
Yeah.
It's fake, man. It's fake.
Yeah, just shoot it from a different angle where you can't see that his shoulders aren't down.
Yes. Well, that's the weirdest thing, is that now WWE's gotten to this point where they're so obsessed with showing you everything that it's like Kevin Dunn's like, give me 20 angles of her shoulder being up.
Bischoff then goes into Missy Hyatt's locker room to get an interview with her. She's in the shower. He tries to sneak in like a pervert and gets shampoo bottles thrown at him. Ironic that he would later be sued for sexually harassing her.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how that happens, huh?
Yeah. Next up, we've got a lumberjack match as Black Blood takes on Big Josh. So this is Black Blood is Billy Jack Haynes with an executioner gimmick. And Big Josh is Matt Bourne, a.k.a. Doink the Clown.
If this were Billy Jack Haynes versus Doink the Clown, I'd have bought the pay-per-view to see it.
No, instead it's this garbage. It's a fucking lumberjack against a guy wearing a child's Halloween executioner costume.
Let me be perfectly clear. We have, throughout this podcast and throughout my wrestling watching, seen some of the most ridiculous shit of all time. I've seen Tajiri summon the Great Muta through a fucking genie lamp. Like, I've seen a lot of ridiculous things in my time. When Black Blood walked out, I actually laughed out loud. Like, it was that ridiculous.
It's horrible. And he's got what looks like a toy axe, too. I hope it's not a real axe.
God, it just looks so bad.
They punch each other a lot. The only thing that gets a reaction is when the lumberjacks start to fight each other.
Which is inevitable. And, like, that's when I noticed that, like, some of the lumberjacks aren't even, like, wearing, like, wrestling gear of any sort. Like, one guy's just, like, in, like, sweatpants and a t-shirt.
I like when guys don't wear their wrestling gear if they're not wrestling.
Yeah, we covered that with, like, the Big Show in his sweatpants or whatever.
Sweatpants. I was just thinking about that.
But, like, in this case, it was one of the bigger guys. It may have been Gang, and he just looked like shit. It's just like, you look like you couldn't be bothered.
Black Blood grabs his axe while the referee is distracted. Dustin Rhodes then hits him in the knee with an axe handle, like a literal wooden axe handle. I have no idea where this came from.
I think Big Josh brought it to the ring.
I guess that would make sense, wouldn't it?
But like, yeah, just out of nowhere, here comes the axe handle.
Should have been an axe match.
Oh God, you can't do better than an axe match.
I would watch that. Josh gets a cradle for the pin.
Great match.
Then El Gigante takes on the one-man gang.
Okay, look, before we even get started with this, I just want to say that this match isn't that bad.
No,
like,
considering who's in it, like
yeah. Gang bumps around a lot.
Gigante.
Gigante is like so enthusiastic, and like the fans are actually into him.
He's so big.
Yeah.
Like he's so tall. He's like 1.5 feet taller than Gang.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And like he can move. Like he's still very awkward, obviously, and lumbering.
He looks much healthier here than he did as Giant Gonzalez.
God, yeah. Like
literally the couple of years was really rough on his health.
Like he just stopped playing basketball. Like he had been like an athlete up to this point. So like he's moving around. He's doing like takedowns and stuff, taking bumps. Like he looks great. Like I can see a future for him here. Like I can see a Flair match to get out of this, right? Like the whole time Jim Ross is on commentary, just apologizing for how much he sucks. Jim Ross is literally like, hey, he's been doing better. He's been, learning some moves, and you keep an eye on him. He'll start doing good one of these days.
Gang is led to the ring on a leash by his leather daddy, Kevin Sullivan.
And that was awkward.
There's nothing gay in pro wrestling.
Nothing at all. The one-man gangbang.
What a great gimmick that would be.
Yeah.
El Gigante has a bunch of little people with him for some reason.
Well, you see, Kevin Sullivan cuts a promo before this match, which makes absolutely no sense.
No fucking sense.
But it has something to do with searching for the man with the third eye. And then out comes El Gigante carrying a little person on his shoulder who has a third eye painted on his head. In theory, meaning that El Gigante has found the guru of the third eye and can now win this match. If I may take artistic liberty with this story.
The little guys all go after Gang and manage to take him down like he's Gulliver. Sullivan punches one of them and it really looks like he stiffed him, which you can totally see Kevin Sullivan doing.
Absolutely.
We're not going to smarten up these dwarfs. Get them over here. I come from the neighborhood.
Well, I'm sure that he was really upset because they weren't that much shorter than him.
Gang gets a wrench, and I think this is a note. This was like an anything goes match, right?
I would have to assume.
Gang gets a wrench and hits Gigante with it. Big splash, only gets 2. Gang goes to the top rope and gets thrown off by Gigante, which is a lot more of a bump than I was expecting in this match.
Yeah, huge bump. He shakes the ring with that thing.
Gang pulls out some powder, but it accidentally gets thrown into his own eyes. And then Gigante hits a lariat and gets the pin. Shivani says, give the big guy credit. He showed a lot of wrestling skills in that match. Did he really, though?
I mean, he did a move. That's more skills than he had before.
Sure. Next up, we've got a Russian chain match as Sting takes on Nikita Koloff. How many gimmick matches can you have on one show?
I mean, and none of them feel like gimmick matches, though. None of the gimmicks are actually interesting.
So on the show we've got 2 steel cage matches, a street fight, a Russian chain match, a lumberjack match, and a scaffold match. And one of the cages is intergender.
Hooray!
Yeah, that is a lot of gimmicks to book on one show.
And but it doesn't, you don't get the impression that when they were laying this out, they were like, all right, this is going to be the gimmick show. We're going to fill it full of stuff and draw a big house. It's just like, well, all these matches suck, so we got to add something.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess if you're going to defend this show a little bit, most of this stuff they kept pretty short.
Oh, yeah. Like the only two matches that go over 12 minutes are the Ricky Morton versus Robert Gibson.
That was way too long.
And the 6-man elimination, which you can't do an elimination match in less than 12 minutes. It just without everybody just
wasn't a lot of reason for that to be an elimination match other than to fill time.
Right.
So Koloff came back to WCW after a 2-year absence in the spring. Could not recapture the magic of his 1980s run.
Not really a shock there, though he was still in great shape.
Yeah, still looking good here. They're chained together. You win by touching all 4 corners like a strap match. Lots of punching, lots of shots with the chain, not a whole lot of heat.
I think I've only ever talked about this once before on the Great American Bash. Which one did we do with the Eddie Guerrero JBL strap match?
We didn't actually do that.
Oh, we didn't?
We've not done that show.
Oh, I may have done a review and complained about that. Okay, sure. Well, I hated it. That's basically what you need to know. And like strap
matches are not good.
They just suck. Like it's not fun to watch somebody go around and touch all 4 corners like that. It's just
one of the only ones I can remember liking. It was the Rock and Triple H had that one in the Attitude Era, but you didn't win by touching the corners. It was just like a street fight where they were strapped together.
That's why like the dog collar match that ECW invented was actually kind of cool. Because literally, it's just like you guys are tethered together. Now fight.
Yeah, like that's brutal. The Piper Valentine dog collar match from the first Starrcade is a classic.
Yeah, I mean that's a good gimmick. Like it's just like you two hate each other. Well, one of you's got to win. You can't get away. That's cool. That's fine. Do that.
Only real pop is when they hit each other with low blows.
Yes, the chain low blows.
They both touch the first 3 corners. First man to touch the 4th wins. They both dive for the corner and hit it. The referee rules that Koloff touched first, and he's the winner.
Cool.
And Sting never got his win back because Koloff left the company. And when he came back in 1992, they made him a friend of Sting's for some reason.
Because everybody's got to be a friend of Sting's.
Yeah.
So they can betray him later.
Koloff was a softie at heart. His character kind of had a history of that.
Yeah, like he teamed with Dusty, I don't know how many times.
Yeah, he turned face after Magnum TA had his accident.
Oh, yeah.
Next up, we got a steel cage match for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship as Lex Luger battles Barry Windham. Luger is the United States champion. That belt is not on the line here. Luger is a face. Windham, I think, is supposed to be a heel, but he mostly gets cheered.
Yeah, because they hate Luger. I think it's one of those things where like this is a very low key version of like when Roman Reigns comes out and you know he's going to win, so you boo him. That's what this is. Everybody knows that it's going to be Luger now, and they hate it because they want Flair.
Yeah, loud "We want Flair" chants as Shivani and Ross are talking as they're setting up the cage.
Oh, God, yeah.
Windham is out first to what sounds like a knockoff of LaGrange by ZZ Top. A pretty good entrance with the lights dimmed and then some pyro.
Absolutely. It's like the first decent entrance of the whole show.
They show the belt that they're fighting for, which looks like complete shit. It's a Florida Championship Wrestling belt that like Dusty Rhodes literally found in his basement, and they put a plate on it that says World Championship Wrestling on the top.
It's kind of a shame for Dusty because like in those days they didn't give you like a replica of the belt like WWE does now when you win it. So like everyone who's ever won the world title has like a copy of the world title in their house. Like that's how it works now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, back then, it's not like Dusty had like an old copy he could just drag out of the cellar. Like, nope.
No, this was the actual belt he had been like dragging around the road and sweating on and bleeding on and all that.
And you couldn't just like buy a replica. They didn't sell them really like that. You had to get it made 6 months.
Yeah.
$10,000.
Luger does not get much. Like, he does not get the pop you'd be hoping for the guy who's about to win the belt.
Honestly, Sting didn't really either in his match.
No, I mean the crowd is not into this. I mean, not much was over on this show.
Honestly, Gigante might have been the most over babyface on this show.
Oh, the cage is not particularly impressive. Looks like it's maybe 8 feet tall.
Oh, it's crap. Like it's like
pretty much
not
chicken wire.
5 feet shorter than the scaffold. Like, it's nothing.
You can only win by pinfall or submission. You can't win by escape.
Which is fine. I actually prefer my cage matches like that because I never like the escape stipulation. Like, it makes them a little formulaic for me. And like, I like the idea of like, it's like a grudge match deal. Like, you're in here because you want to be in here and fight.
I'm not a big, I prefer cage matches being pinfall or submission. I like the brutality.
Absolutely. 2 men locked in a cell.
JR says that Luger was locked up in his dressing room all day and wouldn't let anyone in. That's something to remember for later. JR also, like, he starts he's putting over Luger as what a great athlete. He talks about how he went to Miami to play football, then Penn State. Maybe it was Penn State, then Miami. I can never remember what the order was. He explains they left there after only 1 year and then was playing professional football when he was 19. But also then later says that Luger has a college degree, and I'm not really sure when he got that.
Maybe he went back afterwards, like some pro athletes do that, but I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, maybe he got his degree like while he was, just like, I don't know what he did before he was wrestling. I think he was a bodybuilder, just like hanging out in the gym when they discovered him. Lock up, test of strength, run the ropes, that kind of stuff. Crowd chants Nature Boy. Crowd is not reacting to much of anything that's happening in this match. Luger gets on the top rope but gets thrown off. Wyndham comes off the top rope for an elbow drop, but Luger rolls out of the way. 3 clotheslines from Luger, only gets a 2 count. Luger hits a power slam, signals for the torture rack. He gets Wyndham up in the rack, but Wyndham manages to kick off the cage and escape. Wyndham hits a belly-to-back suplex, and both guys are down. Luger tries for a superplex, but gets thrown off the top. Wyndham hits a flying clothesline from the top rope, and Luger pops right back up. Wyndham goes back to the top, hits a one-legged missile drop kick. Then we see that Harley Race and Mr. Hughes are coming down the ramp. Race signals for Luger to use the pile driver. Luger hits a big pile driver, gets the pin, and the crowd pops huge for Luger winning the title, which is probably not the reaction they were looking for.
Okay, I'm back.
So yeah, Luger wins the match with the pile driver, and the crowd pops huge. No heat for his heel turn.
Well, okay, now we got to talk about this because, but it's not a heel turn. You can't have a heel turn unless, you clearly, demonstrably do something bad
to
a good guy.
Yeah. He used the pile driver. That's not a heel move.
If anything, this turns Harley Race babyface because he helps the babyface Luger win.
Yeah. So I don't understand why they couldn't have Race cheat to help Luger win.
It doesn't make any sense to me, honestly.
No, just have Harley give Luger some knucks or something else.
Yes.
And have him use them on Wyndham.
That's all you have to do. Instead, you just literally it's so confusing. And in the dirt sheets and stuff, you read about this night and they're just well, they didn't really get over very well the heel turn and it didn't seem to pop very much. No, there just wasn't a heel turn. Yeah. There wasn't one.
You understand that this is supposed to be a heel turn because you understand on some level that Harley Race is of course a heel and that's what they're going for. But I don't know that the crowd maybe how many. I mean, there's got to be a lot of people in the crowd who didn't notice Harley coming down.
Yeah, he didn't make any functional difference. He just kind of hung out and Mr. Hughes was just kind of standing around by the door, so he distracts Wyndham for a second. But like, especially like if you're like far in the back, you probably don't even notice. And then like you may not know that that's Harley Race. Harley hasn't been on TV a ton before now.
Yeah,
You may not know that Harley's.
I don't really know what he had been doing leading up to this.
Yeah, Harley's not super heelish yet. It's like, oh, cool. Somebody came and helped Luger win. Good for him.
Yeah. There's some boos when Luger walks out with Race, but they really should have all like if they'd all beaten up Wyndham after the match, I think it would have gotten the point across.
They could have done a double turn here, which is probably functionally what this should have been. They just didn't have time to orchestrate it properly. But again, imagine that Sting and not Wyndham.
Oh my God.
Imagine Race comes down
over his friend Sting.
Yeah. Race comes down, slips some knucks to Luger. He looks at him. He's unsure. He looks at Sting. He's unsure. Clocks Sting with the thing. Yeah. Pins him, wins the title.
And then they put the boots to him.
Put the boots to him in the. That's when you get garbage.
A riot. You got baby faces running in, climbing the cage, trying to get in. Mr. Hughes is holding them off. Like, yeah, that's some heat. Let's get some heat. How does Dusty not know how to book that? How many times did this happen to Dusty?
Literally, that's the Horseman layout. Yeah. Like, that's exactly what they would do.
Famous Horseman angle. The steel cage.
They did it to Dusty.
Yeah. Broke his leg. Hard times.
I swear to God, like.
What happened to Dusty Rhodes' brain?
I don't know. Like, this could so easily have been fixed with that. And then you have babyface Sting versus heel Luger on top. And you have time to build your business.
Starrcade. Yeah.
And here's the thing, too.
Make Starrcade fucking mean something for once.
They never did Sting versus Lex Luger for real. Ever. They hinted at it for literally like 10 years. And it just never actually happens. This was that time.
Yep. Sting does take the belt from Luger at the Great American Bash in 92, but it's not well built, too.
No, it's not this. Like, this is that moment.
Luger's on his way out by then and doesn't give a shit.
I think this, if you pull it off well enough, it makes people forget about Flair. Not completely, but at least there's something else.
And like, give Luger a stable of heels around him, like whatever you want. I mean, you probably don't want to call it the Four Horsemen, but you can give him like if he's got Arn, and we talked about this before we went on the air, but wouldn't Paulie have been the better manager for him?
This is where you form the Dangerous Alliance.
Yeah,
you got
takes over.
Yeah. You got Arn, you got Wyndham, Wyndham, Luger,
Wyndham, Luger, Heyman, whoever else you need.
Austin, something like that.
Yeah. Austin, perfect.
And then suddenly you have a Four Horsemen, but you're not calling them that.
Yeah, they're the Dangerous Alliance. And like you could have Heyman you can do the Heyman match before the main event, before the title match, and have Heyman get humiliated and embarrassed and beaten up by Missy Hyatt, and everybody laughs at him, and then he comes back and he gets his revenge, and who's laughing now?
He's got the world champ in his pocket. Yes. Yeah. It's the exact same thing that Vince does at WrestleMania 17. Like it's a perfect layout.
Yeah.
Like this show could have been so fixed if anyone had just stopped and thought about it. But they didn't.
I love the Dangerous Alliance so much.
Like it's one of the most wasted stables of all time.
They form at Halloween Havoc, I think. That's where Rude debuts.
And then you put like Rude in the stable and you have like a pull and push between Luger and Rude. Just
all right. So for some reason there's one more match. I don't know what to say here. It's a mixed tag team steel cage match. Arn Anderson and Paulie Dangerously versus Rick Steiner and Missy Hyatt. Also, we haven't really talked about this, but we've had a street fight, 2 cage matches, a chain match, no blood on this show.
None.
Not one drop of blood because it's not allowed in Maryland.
Not even close, really.
Yeah. So yeah, and here I don't think intergender wrestling matches are allowed in Maryland either, is my guess.
Well, because it doesn't actually happen.
Yeah, that's why. There's not a ton of time left. We're 2 hours and 45 minutes into the show here. Not sure why. I don't know if this was cut short for that reason. Like, yeah, in theory, you've got 15 minutes left, but generally you want to be out like 10 minutes left in the window, so you're not messing around with it.
Well, they got to have the post-show announcers talking and the credits rolling and all of that stuff.
That's true. I mean, I think generally you want to have everything wrapped 10 minutes out so you're not rushing.
Yeah.
And yeah, WCW does credits, which I've always found that interesting because WWE has never done that.
I've always liked that. I feel like you're giving credit to those people who worked on the show.
It makes it legitimate. Sporting events have credits.
Yeah.
So this was going to be Arn Windham and Dangerously against the Steiners and Missy, but Scott got hurt and Windham got pulled into the title match. As Missy Hyatt is coming down before the match, Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch kidnap Missy Hyatt, so it's now a handicap match.
Which the announcers find absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, they're going to have their way with her. Ha ha.
Ha 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 ha.
Rape is great comedy.
Jesus Christ. Wrestling, stop doing this.
It's just garbage. Heyman hides in the corner while Arn and Rick fight. Steiner nails Arn with the Steiner line, grabs Heyman, slams him, clothesline on Heyman. Steiner gets the pin in 2 minutes, and that's our main event.
It's kind of funny that we basically get the main event that Dusty wanted to put on at Starrcade here.
Yes! Yes! He's been wanting to book that Rick Steiner squash match for so long.
I feel like it would have been exactly like this. Just put Arn in place of Paul and put Rick in place of...
Yeah. Just like clothesline, body slam, 1, 2, 3, Rick wins.
I honestly, as much as people have ripped that apart over the years, I feel like if they had done that, I would have fucking loved it.
It just probably would have made Rick a superstar.
Yeah, just like Rick always has the 60-minute match, and he comes up against Rick Steiner, and he fucking destroys him. And then Ric Flair can be like, I get better with time. You got to do another match.
He wasn't ready.
And literally, like, you can so many matches out of that. But yeah, I think it would have made Rick Steiner the star they needed.
What a horrible show.
It fucking sucked.
There was nothing redeeming. Don't watch this show. Like, listen to this podcast and you're good.
Like, there are some fun ones from this time that are really terrible. Like, please go watch Capital Combat 1990. Fucking RoboCop's on that show.
Or like Chamber of Horrors.
Chamber of Horrors, man.
Spin the wheel, make the deal.
The Halloween Havoc with the Black Scorpion. Like, it's just, those are funny. Those are fun things to tell your friends that you saw.
Yeah, this is bad Southern wrestling.
This is the worst of everything. Everyone on the whole show is in like a weird cowboy outfit and look like assholes. It sucks.
Real Southern. And like not in the good way.
Yeah. Whenever Steve tries to get me to watch a WCW pay-per-view from before 1998, this is what I imagine in my head it looks like, and he's got to talk me into it.
It usually doesn't, but this time, yeah, they really lived down to like everything that people hate about this company.
Jesus Christ.
We talked about this company was not as bad as people think for so long. Like,
no,
really, the beginning of their dark age. The next couple of years are pretty bad under Hurd and then Bill Watts. But I mean, 93 Bischoff comes in. Like, it's not good from right away, but like there's at least an upswing from there.
Absolutely. And like Vader comes in, you get that Vader versus Flair match, Vader versus Sting. Like Vader, and then that kind of carries it on to Hogan. And like, it's not great, but it doesn't suck. There's only like 2-3 years where it actually sucks.
Yeah, I mean, these next couple of years, if not for the fact that like Turner just had an affection for wrestling, like any reasonable company would have canceled WCW at this point. Like, they had nothing. And after Bill Watts like made such an ass of himself and humiliated the company, like they absolutely would have shut it down.
Yep. Thank goodness they didn't, because wrestling history, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, just wrapping this up, just a disaster of a show.
Oh,
everything's wrong. And like having Flair on it wasn't going to save it.
No, like all the other matches still would have been on it, and they all sucked.
Yeah, Flair and Luger would have had a really good cage match, but
yeah. I mean, here's the thing: is that like as we said at the top of the show, there's so much talent on this show. Like there are like 26 world titles on the show, not including Ric Flair. It's great.
Yeah,
All the
this
people
isn't a
they
bunch
have.
of stiffs. Almost every match has at least one guy who's awesome in it. Like, just listen
Absolutely.
to this: Rick Steiner, Arn Anderson, Paul Heyman, Lex Luger, Barry Windham, Sting, Nikita Koloff. Okay, Black Bud, Big Josh, not so great. Brian Pillman, Dustin Rhodes, the Freebirds, the Rock and Roll Express. This is not a roster full of stiffs.
No, Ron Simmons, Scott Hall, Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton.
Yeah, like there's studs here.
And but literally every single one of those people is wasting their time.
They're pretty much all miscast.
Also, how did I forget to mention this? When Dustin Rhodes and the Young Pistols are doing their interview in the back, Dustin Rhodes does a Dusty Rhodes impersonation.
Yes.
He's just like, well, I think we're going to go. Like, I've never heard him do that before, and I lost my mind. Okay, that's the only redeeming thing about this show. Don't watch any other of it.
I mean, the kid had no idea who he was supposed to be.
No.
Just Dusty's lab experiment.
And let's let the record show that I believe he's the only one still wrestling who wrestled on this show.
I think the Rock and Roll Express are still doing indie shows. He's the only one who's doing it on any real stage.
Oh, sweet Jesus. I think you're right. I think
they are. They're still doing indies. I saw them at a show a couple of years ago.
My God.
They were not looking good.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people are dead. I should mention the Observer poll results. Thumbs up, 0. Thumbs down, 239. Thumbs in the middle, 2.
And those are just contrarians, and you know it.
Who thought this show was a thumbs in the middle? Like,
it's impossible. No, this is. Ugh.
Yeah, just an absolute garbage show. Like, truly, probably the worst we've ever reviewed.
It's up there. Yeah. It's up there. Not the weirdest, but maybe the worst.
Yeah. Just a sad, depressing, awful wrestling show.
Hooray! Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap. Next time, we'll have something much more fun, a very weird show. Yes. WWE Vengeance 2006. I swear this is a show where it feels like the matches are just randomly generated.
Like, I lived through this, but when you told me some of the matches, I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. John Cena versus Sabu? What?
Yeah. Mick Foley versus Ric Flair in 2006.
What?
The Spirit Squad in a pay-per-view main event.
Oh, where they face DX, right?
Yeah, this is the DX reunion.
Sweet Jesus.
Rob Van Dam versus Edge, the world title match.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, like Kane versus Fake Kane.
Fake Kane, remember that?
Yeah, Luke Gallows. Does anyone remember that any of this happened?
This is such a kooky, fun time, and we've covered basically none of it. I love this.
What the hell was going on with this company at this point?
Fuck me, I don't know. This is even.
I remember, it's actually a pretty damn good show.
It's like, I want to watch this show so bad. Like, yeah. I want to watch it so bad.
Yeah, very much looking forward to this. We love weird wrestling, and this one's about as weird as it gets.
That's our mission statement.
So yeah, tune in next time for that.